you have a book coming out this year about the wrestling figure Gorilla Monsoon. Two things. You can think about this first thing while I say the second. If you could describe Gorilla Monsoon to non-wrestling people, that'd be great. But I last night read through your short bio of Gorilla in the WWE Legends book from back in the day, and I wonder if you read that back at any point in your writing of this book to see if you still think it holds up as a little bit of what that book will be like.
Well, okay, so the first question, I'll do the best I can.
Yeah.
So Gorilla Monsoon, real name Bob Morella, or Gino Morella, as he was commonly known in the business, very unique figure in wrestling history because his career had so many facets to it at such a high level. So he was a collegiate wrestler in the 50s, a very successful one who transitioned into pro wrestling in the early 60s. And after a couple of years, he wound up being the top villain in what was then WWE, then known as the WWF. And he really was the prototype for what they call the monster heel in WWE, which they still use today. He was Gunther in the 60s, literally. He went from that to eventually becoming part owner by his early 30s. You know, he had such a head on his shoulders that they sold him a piece of the company with Vince McMahon's father, and he was a partner. And he still wrestled for a while, but after he retired from wrestling, Vince Jr., the current Vince McMahon, bought the company from all the partners, including Gorilla. And Gorilla then transitioned to becoming a TV commentator. He wasn't a wrestler anymore. And so when the WWF expanded in the 80s nationally to an entire new audience of people, that would be the only Gorilla Monsoon they would ever know, that TV announcer who would commentate a lot of the WWF's weekly shows and their pay-per-views and things. He later became the figurehead WWF president. And he's this beloved figure by multiple generations of fans from the 60s to the 90s. And also, actually, very rare in the wrestling business, universally beloved inside the business. So I wanted to tell the story of this unique person with such an incredible life. It's a very positive story, especially compared to my previous book on the original Sheik, which was a much darker story. And so that's the idea of who Gorilla Monsoon was. And what was the second question again?
Oh, the second question was, no worries. Have you read at any time the short bio in the WWE Legends book, which is an incredible book, by the way? I think that across your work, that book should get more recognition from other people because they're just great little essays on people. And for that territory and that older time of the WWE, that book is how I learned some detail about a lot of those people. But anyway, so have you read back to your Gorilla Monsoon bio in that book, and how does it make you feel if you had?
First of all, thanks for the praise for that book, because that's a forgotten book. You know, I did that book like 20 years ago now, and I didn't get royalties for it because it was for WWE. I just got a flat payment. I was working for WWE at the time. And I wanted to do this biographical dictionary of the territorial stars of the WWF, the pre-national expansion era. You know, to be honest, I don't think I've ever told anybody this, and not to get too pretentious, but that was the first book I ever wrote. And I was always a big fan of Ken Burns and his documentaries. And they would have the great narration by like David McCullough or Peter Coyote or Keith David. And in my head, I was thinking, I want my prose style to sound like a narration from a Ken Burns documentary, but just about wrestling. And I've actually always done that from that book forward. But that was the first time I at least tried to do it. But to be honest, I think I reread the Monsoon bio in that book maybe at the very beginning of the process, which was like 2.5 years ago. I don't remember, but I think I did. But here's the thing. And I don't know if when you asked me that, if you have an angle on it, but
I don't, in the terms of you working on like one man's life for 2 years after however, probably a week, maybe you would have spent on researching that.
I definitely did it when I wrote the Sheik book. I have a short bio of the Sheik that I wrote in Pro Wrestling FAQ.
Oh, okay.
And I absolutely consulted that. In fact, writing that bio was what inspired me to do the book on the Sheik. But for Gorilla, the one thing I'll say without having it in front of me is one asterisk about that WWE Legends book. And it was because I was working for WWE and the era that I wrote it, which was I wrote it in 2003. I was published in 2006,
Yep.
is I had to preserve a certain level of kayfabe. So
yeah,
I called it kayfabe light, and it was the style that PWI did. That's where I picked it up from, which is basically like, it's okay to acknowledge certain levels of artifice in wrestling. You can acknowledge that wrestlers change personas sometimes, and they take on a different character. I wouldn't say character, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
You could acknowledge that they go to different territories and things, and that they were. I don't know if I talked about good guys and bad guys in there, but the one thing you can't ever acknowledge is that the matches are predetermined.
Yeah.
You have to treat it like a real competition. The titles are really won. The matches are real.
Yeah.
And that was what WWE wanted for sure. And that's what I did with that book. So, but the books that I write now independently are not like that.
Of course.
So,
yeah.
So Irresistible Force, my Gorilla Monsoon biography, is not written in that style. I mean, it's very much reality based. Although the funny thing, and my editor likes when I do this, I guess, is there's certain points in the book where it's like it shifts into a different reality. And I think you might like this because based on what we're talking about, where we know we're talking about entertainment here, right? But there's certain moments where I drill down into a moment where he's in the ring with somebody. He's in there and he's looking across the ring. Bruno Sammartino, heavyweight championship of the world,
Legend,
Madison Square Garden. I describe it like an athletic contest. I get into it as an intense combat. I don't overstress the choreographed nature. I drop little hints here and there. And if you're reading the book in its entirety, you get the gist. You know that they're not really trying to fight each other. You know that they're great friends. But in that moment, I try to sell the intensity of what the fans were seeing. Yeah. So it's like a little shift in tone throughout the book. But overall, the understanding is, yes, this is entertainment. And yes, this is not winning and losing in the real traditional sense,
Yeah. How does it make you feel to know how acclaimed your books are? Full disclosure, I have not read the Sheik book. I have to. It's one of those things where I just, I have so many areas of interest and there are only so many books I get to. I fully intend on reading the Monsoon book because, he was the voice when I first started watching wrestling. And so that's a big thing to me and the hype around it. But that, in the talk of the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame, everybody seemed to say that your book about Gorilla Monsoon is likely going to change perception of whether or not he deserves to be in that Hall of Fame, which, the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame is one of the closest things to an actual Hall of Fame, for anything that people want to say about it, and we don't need to get into that. But how does it make you feel as an author and journalist that your work has the power to change that perception?
Boy, that would be a dream come true for me, and I'm flattered to even think that my books would be considered acclaimed. I know the Sheik book is the most acclaimed one that I've done, Blood and Fire.
Yeah.
And that one, believe it or not, I know maybe this sounds dumb to some people, but I take pride in this. When I first started to write that book, before I wrote that book, if you typed in, we all know how the Iron Sheik and his legacy and everything, God bless him, had completely overshadowed the original Sheik, Ed Farhat, who was in his day a much bigger star than the Iron Sheik was.
Yeah.
But that was a long time ago. Now, before I wrote the book, if you did a Google search on Sheik wrestling, Ed Farhat was nowhere to be found, the original Sheik. It was all Iron Sheik, Khosrow Vaziri. You would have to scroll through page after page. Now, if you do a Google search on Sheik wrestling, Ed Farhat comes up first. The original Sheik comes up first, despite the fact that he hasn't been a mainstream wrestling star since the 70s.
Yeah.
I consider that to be a victory. So what happens now with Gorilla, to me, would be a much bigger deal than that, because also I've been in touch with his family, and I have personal connections to this. I've always felt that Gorilla was a glaring omission from that Hall of Fame. And I have a guarantee from Dave Meltzer to my face that Gorilla is going back on the ballot, because Gorilla could never get enough votes. And with the Observer Hall of Fame, if you're on there for a long enough time, like 10, 15 years, and you don't get in, they take you off the ballot.
Yeah.
He's putting him on the ballot again for the first time in 10 years. And I really, look, I'll put my foot in my mouth if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I think he's going to go in a landslide. a massive landslide he's going to get in. The only question is going to be, how does he go in? Because Dave has these categories. Does he go in as a wrestler? Does he go in as a non-wrestler? No one's ever gone in for the entirety of their career. There's no category like that. It's like, like Kevin Sullivan was on this year's ballot as a booker, as a promoter, which I think he probably deserves to go in for that alone. But it'll be interesting to see. But one way or another, I think he's going to go in. I'm just flattered. I went from loving this stuff and really enjoying writing. Like I tell people, if wrestling didn't exist, God forbid, I'd still be writing. I'd just be writing about other things. And with all due respect to anyone who has written great wrestling books, I don't think you can say that about every wrestling writer or wrestling historian.
No,
That just like, I'm a big comic book fan.
Yeah.
If comic books didn't exist, I don't think that Stan Lee would be writing short stories or novels or poetry. He'd probably be, in a completely different line of work.
Sure.
So I think with a lot of wrestling writers, their first love is wrestling. And for me, I love wrestling. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
My first love is writing. My first love is the written word. So I try to bring that to bear when I write these books, and to see it appreciated means a lot to me. I'm a frustrated historian. So one of the reasons why I think I'm going to sell it to you. You should read Blood and Fire, the Sheik book.
I will as soon as I get off.
But I'll tell you why, though.
Okay.
And I did the same thing with the Gorilla book. The problem with wrestling books, and unfortunately I learned this with Pro Wrestling FAQ, which was it didn't set the world on fire, is when it comes to wrestling books, people love personality-based books. Books that are biographies always do the best. But you see, for me, I love to write about the history of wrestling. So here's a big secret with Sheik and with Monsoon. Part of it is using that personality as a license to carry a lot of other wrestling history, like a Trojan horse, slipped into the book. So if you read the Sheik book, it's not just about the Sheik. It's about the whole history of wrestling in Detroit, of the whole National Wrestling Alliance, of everything else. Same thing with Gorilla. If you read that book, you're learning about the rise of the WWF, what it was like in the 60s, the territory days, what was going on behind the scenes. Who were the partners? How did Vince take over? How did the national expansion happen? It's all there, just with Gorilla Monsoon as the central figure, as the center point of it, whereas depending on what book you read, there's different centers. But in my book, he's the center. So, that's my approach, because if I just said, I'm going to write a book about the history of the WWF, it would not do as well. And that's reality.
It's true. Yeah, I'm gonna, as soon as we get off, I'm gonna order the Sheik book on Amazon. Like, it's just an oversight in my world of just not having done it. So that will definitely happen.